I walked into the fire station that day, hoping that the busy routine and fire calls would keep me distracted from the conversation I just had with my brother Jim. He'd called me in the middle of the night to tell me that Dad was in the hospital. I think he had a heart attack. I was like, come on, he's tough as an ox, never been sick a day in his life. I'm sure it's nothing but heartburn. I promised, after I hung up and promised that I'd call, check on him later on that day. So at the fire station that day, you get busy. Check your schedule, your assignment, what truck you'll be riding, get your gear, check your mask, your tank. You stay busy, cleaning the rigs, washing, drying them, inspecting, maintaining all the first aid equipment. Do a little housekeeping around the fire station. So everything goes well. You have a little free time. Typically, you go into the kitchen, get some coffee, read through the paper. But that morning, I was compelled to go sit in the TV room by myself in the dark. It's starting to weigh heavy thinking about my father, not really knowing what was going on with him. Suddenly, the fire phone rang, which is in the captain's office. It's a loud, distinctive bell heard day or night throughout the fire station, typically for emergency calls or something important. Soon after that, I heard my name called O'Keefe Fire Phone, which is typical for me. I was a new guy. I'd just been with this group for just over 2 years since I joined the fire department. So if you're the boot, if there's something to be done, you're going to end up in the captain's office. They're going to have you go do something. Unsuspectingly, I went there, reached for the phone, identified myself, firefighter O'Keefe. And there it was my brother, Jimmy, to tell me that Dad had died and Mom wanted you home. So I explained myself to my officer, grabbed my keys, and headed out. Now I'm driving home. I have a wife that's 7 months pregnant with our first son. And then I have to explain to a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old daughter that why Dad is so upset and why he had to leave. I caught the next plane to Portland, Oregon, where I grew up, where I was greeted by my 3 brothers and sisters. We're all in our 30s, married with kids, hadn't seen each other in a while, so this wasn't the best situation, but we're making the best of it. My older brother and my sister and I volunteered to go to the funeral home to check on things, make sure everything was set up nice. So we arrived there, and the funeral director said, hey, would you want to step in and view your dad, make sure we prepared him properly? And I got up expecting, okay, let's do this. And my sister stopped and said, why don't you go in there, Brian? I'm like, why just me? And like, well, you've been in the fire department for a couple years, you've been with the military for 15, you tell a lot of stories, this should be nothing for you. So I thought, okay, yeah, I can handle this. It hadn't really sunk in at the time. I grew up, Irish Catholic kid. I'd been to wakes when I was a toddler, peeking over the tops of caskets in people's homes, not even knowing who I was looking at. Attended a Irish Catholic elementary school, and by the time I was in 7th grade, I was getting pulled out of class to participate in funerals. So I'd be standing there with the priest as he's with the incense and holy water. And so I'm thinking, okay, I got this. But of course, it's different now. I see the open casket. It's my father. He's wearing his suit. And of course, I was overwhelmed by that moment, and it struck me, and took me quite a while to gather my composure, as you can imagine, as I still struggle with that today. But once I was settled with that, I just made some comment to the funeral director. I said, Bill always had some nice color, so if you put a little color to his face and his hands, I'd appreciate that. But the funeral went well, and next thing you know, I'm back home. First day back at the fire station, I thanked the guys, let them know that my mom appreciated the flowers that they had sent. And on a typical day, you get a health and welfare check, which is common for us in the fire department. Single person, typically elderly, lives alone. Family, friends wants us to check on them. So I was kind of getting back into the routine, felt pretty good about stuff, wasn't too concerned until I popped that door open on this house, and there was a woman that had clearly been deceased for several days. I was grateful that her face was not facing me, so I didn't have to deal with that image that I still was thinking of just recently with my dad's funeral. So after that, I just said, I confirmed the woman had died and said, I'm going to step out. And so I realized that things were starting to change for me on the fire department. It was no longer just a person or a victim. I was really understanding as someone who just lost a family member. Um, Started to overcome that and moved on with the fire department. Took a promotion as an inspector after about 6 years, and because I wanted to pursue as a fire investigator. Well, part of that, you start with trash fires and car fires, dumpster fires, house fires, but ultimately you're going to end up, the most challenging potentially is facing that fatality fire. So you're there in homes, cars, wherever that victim is, and you're documenting the scene, taking photos. The next day or two, you're going to end up at the mortician's office or at the coroner's office, participating in witnessing the autopsy. So, as you can imagine, I developed that, built up some tolerance again, and I was feeling pretty good. After about 5 years, I was able to go out and investigate fires on my own now. So instead of working with one of the senior investigators, I had developed that confidence and trust within the organization, so they'd allow me to do that. So it's been about, like I said, 6 years. So it's a hot August day around the fair time, and I hear the radio call that we got a house fire. I know I'm on call that day. Doesn't guarantee I'm going to be on the scene as the primary investigator, but then I hear that there's a victim that's been removed, CPR in progress. So that's when I know any serious injury, death, that I'm going to end up at the incident. Got there, grabbed my camera, my notebook. I was ready for this. Visited with the incident commander. Said, "Yep." Had a gentleman that was in the house. They put water on the fire while they searched the area, and they found him on the floor. Knowing that, I went into the home. It's still hot, steamy. The smoke still is heavy in the room. And as I work towards the area of origin, I usually work from the unaffected to the affected. I stopped abruptly, and you could still see the silhouette of where the gentleman had crawled from his bed and made it out into the hallway. And what happens when you apply water at a fire, it converts it to steam, and so everything gets a soot cover over it. So when the firefighters removed him, there was that very distinct outline in the ground. I worked my way and visited with, I got into the room of origin, and I was distracted by an elderly gentleman that was out the window in the backyard pacing. And I find out that he's the grandfather, and that was his son that was in the hospital. And those two grandsons that were still sitting over at the neighbor's porch waiting for me to visit with him was all part of one big family. He worked night shifts. He was taking a nap. The boys had set a fire in one of the rooms playing with a lighter. The grandfather was terribly apologetic and said he had tried everything possible to keep the matches and lighters from the boys. So it was at that moment that things started to hit me again. It was that gotcha moment when I was standing there trying to gain my composure, knowing I'm going to go visit with these boys, and all I could think about was when you sat there looking at them sitting over on the neighbor's porch, knowing that they don't know what how he is right now. And at that moment, I knew that, like me, I just wanted to be with and care for that person I love so much. Thank you.